Well, the story is generally well known in Gibraltar and in La Linea, obviously, about the years that the communication was cut off completely. That's the obvious story. But there is a lot behind that, and this documentary has a look at the bigger issues that were driving both the closure and the eventual reopening. It follows three main strands: the political, the social, and the military. They are intertwined, and in a way that I don't think many people realize.
Wide-ranging interviews.
Yes, in as much as that it's very important that this sort of documentary is impartial, and therefore I've sought interviews on from diplomats, from university analysts, and also people from all sides of the equation. In Spain, we managed to interview the ex-Vice President, Alfonso Guerra, the foreign minister who was involved in the original Lisbon Treaty, which is Marcelino Oreja, and of course, and also from the extreme right in Spain, embodied by the Fundación Francisco Franco, which gives, and of course with the parallel opposite views, giving a very neutral and dispassionate view of the story.
It's been a long journey, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been very long. I mean, the original idea came from when after I produced the documentary series about the evacuation, I was looking for something else to get to grips with, and then came the 300th anniversary of the capture of Gibraltar, and the anniversary being in 2004. That's when the idea started, and then I didn't have any funding then. Then we tried to. I tried to get something together for the 300th anniversary of the Treaty of Utrecht, which would have been 2013. That fell through. And this time round, I've had the wonderful help from Odette Benatar, who has gathered together partners to be able to make this happen. It's very important to realize that not only the production costs, but the rights clearances for a vast amount of archive footage, which a lot of which hasn't been seen, costs a lot of money. And this has been made possible by our partners and as far as local companies are concerned, and the government of Gibraltar.
How can people view it?
It'll be screened at leisure cinemas in the first instance as from the 22nd. It's wonderful on the large screen, not only because of the actual content, but there are some lovely images. A lot of people will, I think, it'll appeal to various generations, because certain generations who lived through that time will recall the images that are there. Some very sad, some very moving, some a little more humorous. No? And then the younger generation, who shocked me in as much as they weren't aware that the actual border was permanently closed. I mean, I remember a commentary from a relatively young person asking me the question, but was it really closed completely? Well, yes, it was, for 16 years with no internet and no mobile phones.
Is there anything that has struck you, anything that you've learned that you thought would not have been particularly there?
Well, it's true that when you start looking at a story like this, historical, factual story, your impressions at the beginning, or your ideas at the beginning, are quite set, actually. But then you go researching and you discover more and more. And what I have learned from this experience is that nothing is what it seems, quite frankly, especially in the world of politics. Even more so when there is a military undertone to the whole thing, which there was. Remember that this happened in the 60s. The Cold War was at its height. Gibraltar probably will never lose its military importance, but at that time it was strategically of vital importance. And it's a strange set of circumstances that led the Spanish government to act in the way it did at that time. That's difficult to understand completely. But there are reasons for it, and those reasons are laid out. Hopefully I would love to be able to carry on, but there's a limit, but there's always more to learn.
How much do you think the history of this documentary points us to where we are today, or what could happen in the future?
It's an extraordinary thing as well that we are living times that perhaps becomes the end of a full circle, because the roots of our troubles with Spain and our differences with Spain is rooted in the Treaty of Utrecht. And that is now up for 308 years, but now we're looking at a new treaty being signed hopefully in the centre of Europe, as it happened 308 years ago. So there is parallels, and I'd like to describe it, and I do in the documentary, as coming full circle to a certain extent. And it's time, I think, that's why it's called Times of Closure, to consider very seriously how we proceed. And it's good to know the background to be able to make the right decisions for the future.